Welcome everyone. My name is Wim Vancauwenberghe. I'm the director of BEMAS, the Belgian Maintenance Society, and we are having a podcast in the framework of our asset performance initiative. We are going to talk about asset management in the AI era. And I have together with me Mr. Sven Strassburg. Hello, Sven. Welcome.
Hello, Wim. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, maybe for the listeners that don't know you, maybe you can explain a little bit what is your role at IBM, and
yes. What is my role? That's always the hardest question of all, I think. We'll start with the hard one and then we go on from there. So what is my role? So I'm Sven Strassburg. I'm a solution architect within the European team of IBM. What that basically means is that I support each of the regions within Europe from basically a specialist approach. So we have pre-sales and sales within each geography looking at enterprise asset management or facility management or engineering solutions. And my role is to give them technical support, but also to provide insights and innovations or thought leadership into accounts that are going through transitions, whether that is adopting new maintenance strategies or whether that is looking at how do we do asset connectivity in a constructive or strategic way. So that's typically what I do. It's as I say, a very broad remit. I also look at sustainability strategies again from an operational point of view, and in general try to get involved with as many technical challenges that a production line or an operational space will have. So you often find me crawling under machines and in engine rooms and all the rest of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a lot of people associate IBM with IT technology, etc., and data centers, but that's not always the case, apparently.
No, I think it's very fair to say that IBM is clearly known for its IT and its technology delivery into telecommunications and financial services, and specifically data centers, and it has been doing that for probably 60, 70 years. However, our history within operational technology goes really much further back than that. One of the founding companies that formed the core of what we now know as IBM actually was selling operational tooling into the rail industry in around the 1890s. So we have a lot of experience in that space, and we have been involved in operational technologies and the operational space since that time. We are also manufacturers. We have manufacturing facilities that we run as any other organization would. We also have utility spaces as well on top of that. So we have a very broad church when it comes to what IBM is. Most people know us for one thing. However, we have quite a lot of experience and activities in other areas. So that's something that's continuing IBM's heritage from way back in the 1890s.
Well, okay. So before we deep dive into the topic of today, the asset management in the AI era, let me take the opportunity to just explain to our listeners what is what is our conference about. We're having the Asset Performance Conference every year, and this year in 2023 we have it at October 25th and 26th, and taking place in Antwerp, Belgium. So we have 11 different tracks. We're focusing on digital transformation in operations and maintenance. We are having a focus on sustainability, human-centered innovations and innovative technologies. And of course, one of the key topics also today is resilience and how maintenance and asset management can contribute to that resilience in industry. We have more than 10 industrial cases that are being presented from well-known companies as Audi, BASF, Procter & Gamble, etc. We have also academic presentations. So and on top of that, 4 hand-on workshops and which one of them is also presented by IBM. So that's interesting. Next to the conference, there is also an evening event where we have the Asset Performance of 4.0 Award. And we have 9 candidates participating. They are also presenting their cases. So it's ArcelorMittal, BASF, Water Group, which is a water company. We have the Dubai municipality participating. We have Saudi Aramco participating, US Steel. We have Van de Moortle, which is a food producing company. Vensot is a service delivery. And also another water company is Waterlink. So interesting competition there, all presenting their improvement cases thanks to digital transformation. And so very interesting to attend at the award show at October 25th in the evening, also taking place in Antwerp. Well, time to talk with you, Sven. And well, let's start maybe by picking your mind a little bit on what do you see happening in the boardrooms at operational organizations nowadays. And so what are the primary goals today?
The interesting thing is that a lot of them are still very much the same as they've been for very many years. It's operational improvements, effectiveness, cost controls, cost reduction is definitely a play. Energy management is definitely high on the agenda. Then you have actually the whole artificial intelligence topic and sustainability, clearly sustainability. But then there's also risk compliance and regulatory compliance. So there's quite a plethora of challenges. However, there are also things such as logistics supply chain challenges. This is specifically true where you're in a highly regulated industry, constantly looking at and worrying about will something as straightforward as part delivery cause me a problem? Now, that is typically not something that I would expect a C-suite to worry about, but over the last 2-3 years, that has definitely become a topic, which kind of suggests also that sort of the global landscape is of interest at that level. Clearly, it is. We're also seeing quite a lot of investor involvement into the operational space, how companies are performing and behaving. But all of those are really very typical. The atypical one is really the inventory coming in and logistics. Sustainability has been there for, as I say, for a couple of years. AI suddenly has really rocketed up as a key discussion item. In some industries where we are, as I say, highly regulated, then it's also looking at the employee mix. We talk a lot about aging workforce. It is definitely something that I see quite frequently being looked at, and it's about that sort of long-term viability, and it's not about how do I deal with the people like me, the oldies. It's about what knowledge they have and what risk does that represent. So it's very much a risk-based discussion. So yeah, those are very much the ones that are on the cards. Energy resilience. That's another really quite interesting topic because again, it's linked to sustainability and it's definitely risen as an important aspect. So those are really them. I would also say that the topics have expanded over the last 5-6 years that are being looked at and addressed, and I think that's a good thing. I think this greater involvement in some of the operational decisions that typically would have been left elsewhere that are flowing into the sort of executive boardroom is a good thing.
Yeah. So, of course, listening to all those different challenges, when you combine them together, this is getting quite complex.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, we always talk about complexity in the operational space, and we somehow seem to think that means that at the strategic level, it's somehow simplified. It compounds itself as it goes up in many ways. So yes, there's a complexity in the operational environment, and some of the initiatives that we're driving at that, or people are driving into that space. It's no less complex actually at the executive level, and I think the pressures that are coming into that space really require a greater information sharing. It's not about data sharing; it's about information sharing. The flow of communication backwards and forwards between the executive suite and the shop floors is much tighter today. I think there's definitely a requirement, but it also means that we are looking at individuals who are masters of lots of different disciplines. And we see that, for example, when you look at the role evolution of, let's say, a CFO or even a CEO, they really juggle a lot of balls. It's not just, as people seem to think, it's about being the public face, but they're involved in a lot of things. They're orchestrating a great many things. So yes, there's a complexity there. I think there's definitely, and it's grown over time. And there are articles that back that up within The Economist, for instance, have been looking at very much how the executives have evolved what they do and how they cope, and that is very much in line with what we're seeing. And in many ways, it's a good thing, because it forces organizations to really understand what it is that's important to them, and they focus in on those aspects that drive the greatest amount of value to their clients. So it's not a negative in any way. It's just that the workload has increased. Yes, I would say.
Okay, and it's not just about making money anymore. There are much more considerations to be taken into account.
That's right. I mean, these are all levers in order to remain profitable and increase margins. But there are definitely, from a sustainability point of view, if you look at the ESG, you have the environmental aspects. There's definitely a social aspect, and yes, there's the governance. We know about the governance, but if we look at social, for example, and let's take IBM, we ourselves measure not only what we do outside the communities we support, or the academic institutions that IBM is involved with, but also voluntary activity. And it's part of the culture, if you will, of IBM, that we not only are active members within the IBM community, but we are also active voluntary members. And I think this is something that, if you will, the ESG is brought in. So yes, the executives will also be influenced by that, because shareholders are expected. Other interested stakeholders are interested in not only what you're doing as an organization in your pursuit of operational excellence, but they're also interested in these other factors, and these are very soft factors. And I think that was quite a change over the last 20, well, in my case, maybe the last 40 years. But anyway, let's keep it to a central time frame in the last 20 years. And it is part and parcel of how we see also the workforces changing the way that they interact with their community, and so on and so forth. So yeah. It's not just about making money. I think that was the short answer to the very long one I've just given you.
But okay, and on top of that, sustainability. Okay.
Yeah, very much so.
So you have, of course, quite a lot of challenges in the energy front. What does that mean? How do you see that evolve, and how does that translate into the operational ground and the workshop floor?
Okay, I think we need to take this one in really two aspects. There's the energy that an organization uses and have as a committed goal to reduce in some fashion, and then within that there are some large corporate programs. So whether that is self-generating and storing your energy, or whether that is leveraging green certificates for energy consumption. That's a corporate activity, and that is in full swing, and rightly so. And looking at alternative energy sources, and you see the rise of hydrogen. That's very much that's the corporate. In the operational space, what we're seeing is definitely questions being asked around what are the processes that we run? How do we run those processes? And can we take process steps away that we would typically ever put in, in the old days where energy was in actual fact being looked at? And we are seeing line members or operating staff making decisions that actually have a positive impact on lowering the amount of energy that's being used within the operational space. We see new technologies being introduced that are much more around the whole predictive maintenance, condition-based maintenance activities, which again have a positive impact, because if I understand those assets, I can look at what's the most optimum operational rate. Sometimes it can be a little bit lower. It drives that outcome that I want, so I still get the quality product that gets delivered on time at the end of the line. We also are seeing people look at continuous improvement, where we take a process, and instead of trying to make every single individual process the best it possibly can, we take a holistic end-to-end view, and some of the processes may be inefficient. We can look at it and say, well, that's not a very efficient process, but in the context of where it is, the one preceding it and the one after it, it is the most efficient way of running the process. However, in doing that and understanding the machines or the line that's actually supporting that, you can start to gauge at what level those systems need to operate and run at. So there's definitely joining up of the dots taking place, where before it would have only been a single KPI on OEE efficiency, or whatever the OEE mark was, or in the or whatever the KPI is. Now it's broader. There are sustainable KPIs. There are energy KPIs that are on the shop floor, and all of these things are positive, but really are the easy things. So we're really dealing with all of those easy challenges. And now what operational organizations are looking at is what are their own energy generation, battery storage, maybe it's equipment switch out that they have to perform in order to go to the next stage. Are there any other methods? Do we need to drop product lines? Do we need to maybe change the way the product line is engineered? So we engineer for maintenance, engineer for sustainability, or the whole cradle to cradle approach. And energy is actually a very good one to start with. Now, there's another really interesting reason why energy is so important, is because it's escalated as a cost item. So whereas before it might not have been so high on the agenda, now it's very much there. As I say, it's represented with KPIs. Workforces are rewarded on energy-saving measures. There's a cultural change that looks at how energy is leveraged at the operational space.
Yes.
So these are some of the things that we're saying.
And of course, by reducing energy consumption, you're also reducing, or you're having a positive impact on sustaivability, of course, also. So that's
as long as you report it.
Yes.
Well,
that's as long as you report it. That's something very important.
Yeah. So what we're also saying is that people, you see, here's the interesting thing. When you're talking with engineers, they often don't see what they do, or the technical staff and even the operational staff often don't see that what they're doing actually is something that aligns to a corporate strategy. There's a little bit of a disconnect between those two. And it's interesting when you have these conversations around asset optimization, that when you bring in the word sustainability, or why is that not reported, or do you report it, or how do you report it, they always look at you rather blankly and say, well, why should I report it? It's an operational improvement. It's making the process better. And the answer to that is, yes, it is. That is its primary function. That's absolutely true. But it also has a secondary function. It has a secondary benefit. So that needs to be captured. It needs to be, it somehow needs to find its way through to those people who are reporting on these things. The other aspect is that a lot of the operational people seem to be very shy about the impact that they're having themselves on delivering the corporate outcome. I think there's definitely an army of people out in the workforce that do brilliant things, but are somehow shy of telling people how brilliant they really are and what they're doing. It's not just about energy saving, it's about how do you drive asset optimization and keep assets running for the longest period of time. We see people who are fantastic foragers for parts. There's a company I know where they still run very, very old PLC-5s, for example, and their sourcing teams are brilliant, absolutely inspired as to how they get spare parts. And all of these people that do these things they believe they're doing the right thing for their organization. That's absolutely true. But they're also doing brilliant things for keeping what are already asset neutral parts as asset neutral as they probably can be. They are probably inefficient because there's a definite inefficiency curve there. But let's take it from a point of view that says these are capital assets. They've still got a fair amount of life left in them, and they keep them running. And they keep them running at a really impressive rate. But they're very shy. They lack that communication or desire to communicate.
So and there is a need from the executive level to also being informed, to know what is happening, to be able to communicate about that, to be able to report about that. So we need to go into what we can call maybe a more intelligent asset management.
As part of a strategy, yes, I absolutely agree with you. Clearly, as I said right at the very beginning, I belong to a group that talks about intelligent asset management, and really what we're talking about there is deploying the strategies that we've been talking for 20, 30 years around going from break, fix, or run to fail all the way through to prescriptive maintenance, and having all of those really interesting strategies from condition to predictive to whatever the latest strategy is. Each one of those relies on additional capabilities, whether that's connected systems, and connected systems being, obviously, we went through the IoT phase. We're still very much in that, and I think it's even though people don't seem to talk about it, it is delivering quite interesting results. But connecting our assets, getting a better understanding of what those assets do, how they behave under load, how do they actually interact with the processes that are being demanded of them. And we can talk a little bit about that because there's some very interesting characteristics that people think they know about their assets that they really don't know what's going on, all the way through to, let's say, using deep learning algorithms or machine learning algorithms to understand when an asset's going to fail. So yes, absolutely, intelligent asset management is very much a technique, but it requires multiple strategies to be followed. It's not saying that every single asset will be under prescriptive maintenance. That's not what this is about. It's about really understanding our asset estate as fully, as completely as we can, and then making operational decisions based on the evidence. So we talk about science-based targets with sustainability. When we look at continuous improvement, again, it's all about the evidence. It's about the data that we have. It's about what it is that we, when we do a shift handover from one shift to another, a lot of information is passed across to the new shift. So these things are happening already. It's now leveraging that connected digital infrastructure. And I know digital have been around for very many years, and I spoke with an executive a couple of years back where he was very candid, and he said that up to now we've had digital manual systems with the emphasis on manual. So we had lots of digital silos with manual process in between, and the goal was to move to a little manual but greatly more digital. So more of a digital system with manual supervision or human supervision. So there's definitely a shift to interlink all of these different systems, and that's part of an intelligent asset management strategy. It's also leveraging this artificial intelligence construct that everybody talks about. I tend to use the terms of ML and deep learning, machine learning, deep learning as a way of talking about this topic, because AI always has this rather scary view of the world, and in reality, it's much more of an augmented support. So especially when we talk about intelligent asset management, it is very much about how we can leverage that technology to assist, whether it's the operators of a particular cell, or whether that is the plant supervisor, or if that's actually fact the chief operating officer. How do we assist them, not how do we take over the role?
Yeah, okay, yeah. And that's maybe interesting. Can you give some concrete examples on what such an AI system could deliver when it's connected to all this data that is there already and available already?
I think the funny thing is it's what it already is delivering in many cases. I think if I look at condition monitoring, for example, where we would leverage, I don't know, let's say it's an unsupervised anomaly model, where the model itself is identifying multiple data points within an event stream that's coming from a system, to be able to indicate to an operator to maybe slow down. Maybe that's the easiest and simplest way of doing it. It's not to say that they should stop doing what they're doing, but it's just the rate of activity is not necessary. Or it could be that we're talking about a change in the maintenance cycle. Again, something fairly straightforward, something fairly easy. So instead of going from a 10,000 cycles to, it could be saying, well, actually, in this case, I need to go to 8,000 cycles. And maybe under a different load, it could be 10,000 cycles. Or in process industry, it could be, and it is being used to identify the cleaning schedules between batch runs. But also importantly in their industry is actual fact, are there any problems that we can potentially see in the batch schedule, so we can swap the schedules around. So instead of having a long running batch process that potentially could fail halfway through, halfway through, we actually change the schedule. So we put a short one in, do some maintenance as we do the cleaning, and then put the long running process in. So we're seeing those kind of activities coming through. So it's not necessarily that, and again, I find this really interesting. People say that these are things that could happen. They're actually things that are happening. Also, another one that I personally like is leveraging technology such as this for worker safety. Preventing forklift truck collisions, or the just-in-time delivery of parts to cell and potential human-machine collision. So I'm a very big believer that if I can start to predict where some of the hotspots are and how the humans will interact with and the machines interact with that in that space, can I start to indicate and show that there are these potential collisions? So what I'm doing there is not only am I looking at the technology to improve, let's say, the effectiveness of a machine, but I'm also looking at it from a human factor. How do I keep them safe? Because shop floors tend to be, by their very nature, quite hazardous. Maybe it's a strong word, but it is a hazardous environment. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of movement. And if I can leverage something like an intelligent AI-driven solution, or machine learning unsupervised learning solution into that space, then that's a benefit. Another area that we're seeing it, and this is actually where a lot of the time that I have is in robotics. How do we leverage robotics to be able to do a walk-around inspection where it's an autonomous walk-around inspection? So let's say a system has a work order. The work order then says, okay, robotic system A, go and do your initial walk-around because I have a particular problem in the sector. They can do the walk-around, do the initial triage on that sector, come back. And now when I provide that work order to the next person in the assignment list, me as a maintenance engineer, I have much more information about the context. I have an indication of the initial triage that's been taking place. I can then bring in tooling and parts that may not necessarily be stated on the work order or the job plan, and so I'm much more efficient and much more effective. Yeah. So it's Some things we're already doing, some things we should be doing, other things people are exploring, and robotic systems are one.
Yes, of course. And in this in today's world of generative AI, without any doubt, you get often the question, what does generative AI means for my maintenance department? What can I do? Have you already thought about that? And
people ask
can
about
you
it,
share
yes.
some ideas with us?
Yeah, I think this is a really fascinating area. Now, there's an awful lot of scare stories in and around generative AI, and they will continue because that follows that concept of the scary AI. But really, in the world that we live in, from a maintenance point of view, I think it's actually fact more the ability to gain insight, to glean insights from a vast amount of data that's available to us. A lot of we as humans are exceptionally good at seeing patterns of within data, but we tend to look at those bits of data that we are familiar with. And what I'm finding interesting is, can I use a generative AI to give me an insight that I wasn't aware of? Now, I still have the ability to look at that and say, no, that's not quite right. That's not actually what the problem is, but it's a very interesting perception that I hadn't thought about. Okay, so maybe there's something there that I need to go and investigate. And it's because it's taking data from data sources or from making connections to areas that traditionally we would not have looked at. Doesn't mean that it's actually an unsound or an unadvised activity. It just means that historically we've excluded it for whatever reason. Maybe somebody told us that data set wasn't very good, or this evidence wasn't really suitable. And maybe at first glance we would have actually agreed because it didn't fit our expectation of what we expected out of that information source. So using generative AI enables me to see a context that I may not have drawn. And that then leads me to say, okay, I can now go and explore that in more detail if I need to, or if I find it interesting. And then maybe there is a correlation there that I can take away and bring into my world. So generative AI for me is very much a tool to help me get through a vast amount of data very quickly in order to get to maybe salient points that I've asked for. That's one aspect. Another aspect is really to also give me a hand in identifying the tasks and the operations that are required. Not every task is required. We talked about earlier about condition monitoring. There's also predictive maintenance. All of these are lots of signals, lots of flashing lights to say, I'm important, look at me. And there's a lot of complexity in that space that we talked right at the very beginning. And sometimes it's important to cut through that and actually really get a prioritized list. And again, it might not be what we would believe is the prioritized list. And there's an example that I have, which I was talking to an industry colleague of mine, and we were talking about predictive maintenance. We said, well, what happens if a predictive maintenance algorithm gives you a prioritized list of tasks? And the chap says, yeah, I'd look at it. It might be very interesting, and it'd probably be very accurate. And I said, yeah, okay, that's very nice, but you sound you're sitting on the fence here. He said, oh yeah, well, I don't get paid on that list. I get paid on this list. And I said, well, what's that list? He says, well, that's the list my management give me of the priorities that I need to deal with. And therefore, I may see all of these items on your AI-generated list as being highly important to me, because I know from working in that space that those are the things that are going to fail. But this is the list I get judged on. So which one am I going to work on? I'm going to work on the one I get judged on. However, if I then use a generative AI approach, I could maybe come up with an argument as to why I should be working these as to those. That's more than just saying, these are things that get measured. Do you see what I'm getting at? It's very easy to get into that habit of saying, oh, it's going to do me out of a job. It really is not what that's about. It's about understanding the context And from that context, being able to say, yeah, this is what we're going to do.
Okay. And of course, all of this depends and sits on a good data quality and a good data delivery.
Yes. Now we need to be careful what we mean by good. Good. So when people normally think about good, it's excellent. Companies spend a lot of time worrying about the fact that their data is poor in their mind. And yes, data can always be better, but it's surprising how little data you need in order to actually get quite respectable results coming out. So, for example, let's take computer vision, which is a topic that I'm currently quite deep in. When I bring up the topic of computer vision, I'm always told I need 5,000 to 6,000 images and so on and so forth. And potentially, yeah, okay, I get that, but there are techniques that you can use where I can start off with 100 images. So I was doing a piece of work around worker safety, and we had 75 images, and using an augmentation technique, a machine learning technique, I turned that into 5,500 images. So yes, the people who were telling me I need 5,500 images were right, but I didn't start with that. I started with around 70, 75 images. And then when I trained the model, it was really interesting how accurate it was in a slightly different context to the one I trained it in. So I think there's definitely this idea that how can I put it?
You need this excellence. So you're waiting until you have high quality data, then you're doing nothing, and then you're not leveraging that data. So you need to break into that circle in order to not start or stop waiting and start acting and doing. Is that what you want to say?
That's exactly right. That's you actually put it so much nicer than I was going to put it. That's why I sort of stumbled around the whole. How do I bring that thing in? And actually, it's not just an anecdotal evidence. It's actually supported by surveys that we and others have done, that most of the data that we collect is just stored. We don't actually do anything with it because we somehow believe good is something else than what we currently have. And my view is exactly what you just expressed, which is, let's give it a go. Let's see what we have. And maybe what we have is actually more than we need for what it is that we are trying to achieve. So a project I did a couple of years back was looking at rotating assets and understanding how those assets behave, and can we actually see bearing failure on the front shaft of the rotating asset. And what we looked at was temperature. Yes, we had vibration, we had an accelerometer, and we also took the three-phase. And it was really amazing what we discovered about that particular set of assets, how they behaved, how they were impacted by weather, how they were impacted by load. And it was not what we expected. So when we looked at the telemetry data that we got from the inbuilt sensors, it told a very different story to these very simple add-ons that were put against the assets. And my view is we have plenty of data. Data is something that we have. We are often process rich and data poor. What I mean by that, processes will run regardless of the data we collect. And we very rarely look at the data in order to take a view of the process. And I think we need to understand that this data is flowing, start to analyze it, whether it's statistical methods or whether it's using something more sophisticated. But let's just start. Let's look at what we have. Let's explore it. And the other thing is, let's also look for other data silos that we may not know about, because just like there's information silos, there's also telemetry data silos, and plenty of them. They're on people's machines, they're on cell workstations, they are all over the place. There's
measurement device. Huh?
Every measurement device, that's exactly right, and mobile phones. And there's a plethora of data sources out there that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about the data stored in an enterprise asset management system? So as you have also IBM Maximo, of course.
Yes.
So
yes.
How about that data? Is that useful for
very much so.
generative AI and
well, actually, let's go the other way. Is it very useful for statistical methods, for condition methods, condition monitoring, and also predictive maintenance? Because you must make it predictive maintenance uses machine learning algorithms. So it's a form of AI. The answer is absolutely yes. I mean, you have asset history, you have work order history, you have failure conditions. Again, it comes down to how you've reported these things. But let's say that we've reported them reasonably okay, not brilliantly, but reasonably okay. There's a lot of material there that we can use and take a view on when it comes to training models, especially when we're applying those models against event streams, the flowing data from the telemetry systems. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that an EAM solution or an asset lifecycle management solution doesn't sit in isolation. It sits in a context. There are other systems involved. There are, as I said earlier, PLCs at one end. There are MESs involved. So from an execution point of view, there are also inventory systems involved. Now, when we look at generative AI, you can say, okay, well, I've just mentioned things that are very specific to the asset management domain. But now when you look at generative AI, you can actually go a little bit broader and you can start to say, is there a relationship between this particular asset maintenance strategy that we have over here with the inventory draw that we have with the procurement interaction with the MES schedules, and start to see potential patterns of behavior. And therefore, as I said earlier, around that ability to take multiple data sources and summarize it in a particular way. That, in my opinion, is quite a good use case where I'm not going to say the asset management solution is at the center of it, but it is one of those systems that you draw information from.
Yeah.
And if it is a silo in isolation, then we probably need to come in and have a conversation, because it really shouldn't be. There should be lots of interactions with other systems, and those other systems have data that we can use, and therefore it's all fair game when it comes to something like a generative AI, or actually any AI methodology, whether that's right at the very entry into it, or whether that's into the sort of generative AI domain. I think it's all fair game when it comes to data sources. Yeah. So I definitely think a system like Maximo or another SAP's or Infor, whoever it happens to be, they're all good sources, and they're fair game for AI.
Yeah. Okay. So
sorry.
There we have the dream. Okay, it's not a dream; it's a reality today. All these things that have been talking about are happening today, are possible today. Organizations get more and more practice in implementing it also, I guess.
Yes.
So that's happening. On the other hand, of course, we have a reality. You already touched it in the introduction. We have a reality of an aging workforce, an aging asset base. So how do you connect this interesting and bright future with this reality of today, of this aging workforce and assets?
Yes, and that's actually, and then also workplace safety comes into that same mix. I think the approach that we have explored and continue to explore is this idea of collaborative AI. This idea, how do I collaborate in using expert systems? So we believe that people have been talking about knowledge bases for years and years and years, where we take all the documents and we have fuzzy logic or natural language searching or whatever it happens to be. Our view is you need to add into that also collaborative sessions. So if let's say I'm a junior employee, can I actually engage with somebody who's more senior or more experienced? It doesn't have to be senior, it can be more experienced. They may not even be anymore in the workforce. They could also be recently retired. And do it in a way that is, let's say, technology native, i.e. there's a tablet or phone, it's very pictorial. I can point it at something, open up a stream to another individual, talk through and share ideas and share documentation within that session. and have that other person validate or actually correct or guide or do something. And then when that session is complete, be able to take the whole of that, wrap it up as an item of knowledge. Now, it's obviously an interactive, often video, audio, different data sources. Maybe there's also web interaction that comes into it. But wrap it all up and drop it into the same expert system so that when I, as an operator, come in and say, oh, I've been assigned this work order, it's been 18 months, this typically happens to me, it's been 18 months since I last saw that particular type of issue. What do I do? So I obviously interact with the expert system, and it gives me an idea that, yes, you're about to replace the flange, but really take care about the seal, or the gasket, and here's some knowledge articles about the gasket that you need to be taking a closer look at. But then I spot that there's actually, in fact, a whole collaborative interaction. I can then watch that. I can hear what's being said, and I can see what's being drawn up at different stages. And maybe I learn far more from that snippet than I would from reading the data sheet. I then can go back to the data sheet and pick that up.
Yeah.
So in that way, what we're effectively doing is using technology and using these algorithms and these advanced AI techniques to bring that knowledge into a very natural way into the corpus that the organization leverages. So that's one way I see that taking place. Another way is really leveraging that whole predictive and prescriptive approach. Prescriptive is always a horrible word because that sort of suggests that it's telling me what to do. I would actually always argue that it's more of a guide, because as humans we can still ignore it. There's no reason why I have to take the advice of an expert system. But at least I have a reference point, and I can then make up my own judgment based on my experience. So I think there is definitely a way for us to interact with that knowledge base. And it's not a digital knowledge base. I'm talking about that human, people like me or similar. And also the other thing that we need to be very mindful of here is that some of that knowledge could actually be in the people we're just bringing into the organization. Because, as I said right at the beginning, it could be me as a digital migrant in this instance, sort of coming into the digital era, not understanding something. And my expert interaction will be actually with, let's say, somebody who's just come in from an apprenticeship scheme, because they are much more versed in that technology area, and they can then interact with me. So it's not always about the aging workforce that's just going out the door that has the knowledge. It could also be the aging workforce like myself interacting in a collaborative session and getting information from new entrants in. So it's both ends of the spectrum that and often we only see the one, but it's actually both that how do we do that? And I believe that these kind of techniques are really quite important. Sorry, okay. It's leveraging that technology for both those kinds of aspects.
Thank you for this inspiration. And I've never heard about this possibilities of having these interviews and using that as an input for a generative AI system and learning from that. It's a bright idea. So thank you for that. There is another aspect. So you've talked about the aging workforce.
Yes.
Let's talk about the aging assets. Do we really need to upgrade them in order and equip them with a lot of sensors, etc., in order to be able to start with using AI and using predictive algorithms, etc.?
I think it's one of those really challenging questions, because there is an argument to say that if I upgrade a piece of equipment, it is going to be more energy efficient, because obviously some of the techniques that we have are definitely it definitely would give us a benefit. However, what we don't do is we don't look at the invested carbon that's already in that piece of equipment. And if we really look at it hard, we would probably take the equipment and push it to landfill. We don't really reuse or repurpose or recycle the assets. Some do, but on the whole, they tend to get scrapped or thrown. So one of the things that, and The problem is also one that the vast majority of the assets we have are going to be in that sort of older category. If I look at buildings, if I look at some of the machine rooms that I go to, really fascinating how they manage to keep these assets going. Brilliant. So retrofit is definitely something that we see is happening out there. People are upgrading 40-year-old pieces of equipment with latest control systems. I think that's brilliant. I like that idea. I like the idea that we also look at, can we, through these control systems, run these machines more efficiently, more effectively? And the answer is potentially yes, we can. We see a lot of reconditioning taking place, which is good. And we're seeing robotic systems go in where it isn't really feasible to instrument a system and do those regular walk-around inspections, as I said earlier, which would typically be given to a person to do. We can actually give to a robotic system to do. Now, that does not mean that we're getting rid of the human in that instance. What we're doing is we're actually taking the instrumentation to the asset. So that's fundamentally what's happening in that type of scenario. And it's very similar to a retrofit. The only thing is the retrofit is onto a machine that happens to go and explore the environment and take those readings. Yeah. And it also comes down to something really important that says, do I need that high frequency data from these systems? Is it, we've relied on a point in time reading from these systems for years and years and years, and it gives us a good feel for what's happening with that system. If we go then to a connected environment, are we just adding to that data mountain that we have, where we take relatively high frequency data points and never really look at them? So having remote systems that are autonomous, that have the ability to do collision avoidance, that have the ability to use both telemetry and visual cues, I think is definitely something that we should be exploring. So aging assets, invested assets are becoming digital, but not necessarily in the way that we would expect, which is either through replacement or wholesale retrofitting. We also have these other techniques that are being deployed very effectively. Effectively.
Okay. So you're talking about that there's a huge amount of carbon already invested in these equipments. So from sustainability point of view, it's not very it's not very smart to just replace them, and we really need to extend those lives. And do you think that by extending this life, we do also contribute to a sustainability goal, and should we report about that? And how do you see that? Would that be possible to report about it and see it as a sustainability contribution?
I'm sure it definitely can. Is it a contribution? Yes, if it's done in the correct way. I think if it's a huge blast furnace, okay, that's one end. But let's take the carbon element out of it. Let's say it is a consumer of energy, and let's say it is a perfectly okay milling machine. And by the way, digital milling, CNC milling machines have been around a long time, and if they are the more modern end of the spectrum, they are more efficient. I get all that, and they mill to closer tolerances. But let's say this is a general first pass mill, and we then, let's say, do some replacements against it. Let's say we put a better milling head, and let's say also we change the motors out and the control systems out. Okay. Have we changed the entire machine? In that instance, yes, all the mechanical parts, but it's still in the old frame. I think the answer is yes to the question, because it comes then down to, if we replace it with good quality parts that last longer and are already have a level of efficiency against them, then yes, I think we can report against it. But if we do what procurement sometimes forces us to do, which goes to the lowest cost option, then potentially it's better to go and buy new, because really, whilst we do the overhaul on a piece of equipment, we might be using substandard components that then burn out and they go to e-waste, and then we just keep replacing them with these cheaper SKU items that then go to e-waste. That is not a sustainable approach. And yes, okay, it's keeping the asset lasting longer, and yes, we're protecting all that carbon that's invested. But in doing so, we're throwing all this stuff into e-waste and landfill. So that kind of scenario doesn't work.
No.
But if we do it in a way that says we actually improve the materiality of that unit, in other words, we make it better than it was before we started the overhaul, then I think it's definitely something we should be looking at and definitely something we should be reporting against.
Yeah,
we do it with buildings already. I mean, we're making a lot of the existing stock that we have, we're improving it. When you look in the cityscape, it's often you'll see a building in a skeleton format where the facade has been taken away, and then they rebuild the entire structure, and all of a sudden you have a very highly efficient, very digital unit. But the core of it, the foundations and the actual structure, is still the old building. So we see it being done. It's just how we do it. So that's the answer on that one, I think.
Okay, perfect. So I guess we have covered the idea of asset management and operational management in the age of the AI.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Sven, for your insights, for sharing your thoughts. And as a matter of fact, you will be presenting also at the Asset Performance Conference.
Yes, I look forward to it, actually.
Yeah, presenting a session on October 26th, 9 a.m. So people willing to interact with you, hearing your thoughts about what are you going to talk about, Sven?
Well, it's actually this particular topic. I think, if I remember rightly, it's sustainability and AI and operational efficiency and effectiveness.
Okay.
So yes,
perfect. So then we will learn more. You can be able to learn more about this, and then you're also presenting or giving a workshop at the conference.
Yes.
Following your presentation there, and then you're going to talk about computer vision.
Yes, as it applies to maintenance and driving a consistent maintenance outcome. So yes, we'll be looking at computer vision, deep learning.
Yeah, and as it is a workshop, it's quite hands-on. People will be able to see what is happening, how does it work, etc.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to go into the weeds, and hopefully it'll be of interest.
Yeah, well, it's a 1.5 hour session, so without any doubt, very interesting. So by that, I thank you, Sven, for being here, and to the listeners, let's meet each other at the next podcast.